السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وأصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا على أنفسنا طرفة عين. So welcome everyone to today's program. Inshallah, this is a very important topic that that affects our life on a daily basis. And it's very important to youth as well, and many young Muslims out there. Three main topics will be discussed. One being the effects of cell phone. Many of us are glued to our mobile devices on a daily basis. So we'll hear about the effects that has on us. And then inshallah ta'ala, there will be discussion about eating nutritiously and its benefits as well. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم واشكروا لله إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. All you who believe, eat from the good, lawful things we have provided for you, and be grateful to Allah if it is indeed Him that you worship. Allah Azza wa Jalla also says, يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين. O children of Adam, dress properly whenever you are at the worship. Eat and drink, but do not waste. Surely he does not like the wasteful. So these are just a couple of ayats, and there's many ahadith and many ayats that discuss the manners of eating. And that will be discussed further, inshallah. And finally, it would be the topic of marriage. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباء فليتزوج فإنه أغض للبصر وأحسن الفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاه متفق عليه. So the Prophet ﷺ said, young man, those of you who can support a wife should marry, for it keeps you from looking at strange women and preserves you from immortality. But those who cannot should devote themselves to fasting, for it's a mean of suppressing sexual desires. So this is just one hadith of many that discusses the importance of marriage. So these are going to be the topics that will be discussed, and it will be discussed by someone who we are all very familiar with. He does not need an introduction, but we'll give him one nonetheless, inshallah. He is a professor and scientist at Howard University. Howard University College of Medicine. He has numerous scientific publications, sits on the editorial boards for scientific journals, and reviews over 24 research papers annually for over 12 journal publication. He is recognized for his scientific work both nationally and internationally. He is a leader in the Ethiopian Muslim community. He has given back to the Muslim community locally and in Ethiopia. He is a founding member of Badr Ethiopia and First Hijrah Foundation. So our speaker, inshallah, is Dr. Zaki Sherif. Go ahead, Doctor. Dr. Zaki? One second.
Yeah, it was bad over here.
Hello?
It was bad over there too.
Hello?
It was really bad.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can I also share my screen because I have my presentation in slides, in PowerPoint slides?
Yes. Zharari Jamal, can you please make Dr. Zaki a co-host so he could share his screen? Okay. You should be able to share his screen now, Doctor.
He's co-host now, right now.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
MashaAllah. There you go.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah. Yeah, screen is clear.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. MashaAllah, today's topic, of course, has been announced and has been promoted, I'm sure, efficiently by Ustaz Jamal. And MashaAllah, Hamar, thank you for the introduction. Now, I'm going to be speaking in English, and my presentation slides are all in English. I know the majority of the audience is going to be understanding my presentation in English, and I'm sure most of you are youth. That's what I was told, at least. So that should not be a shortcoming in the presentation. But I will interlace some Zharari speeches along the way, just to emphasize, especially in places where emphasis is necessary. But anytime, if you have any questions, of course, you can stop me. So the topics were given, and I like to actually orient the presentation in such a way that it goes back to the fundamentals. We can always talk about, for example, as the medical scientist, we can talk and discuss the issues of symptoms. Symptoms are just manifestations of the underlying cause, the underlying disease, the most important root cause of diseases. So when we talk about smartphone as suggested, or marriage, or we talk about nutrition, let's look at the fundamental. Let's look at the rudimentary stages. Let's look at the foundation for anything that comes above the surface and then eventually is manifested. The manifestation is not as important as the foundation, okay? If we start from that perspective, inshallah, we'll have a good understanding of what I'm trying to communicate to you, inshallah. So the secrets of a genuinely successful life. I know the promotion was secrets to better life. I like to coin it in this phraseology because we want to be successful in life. Just like as Muslims, we want to be successful in the hereafter, or at least get admitted into the hereafter. We want to make sure that this triumphant journey that we hope to have conducted in this dunya will eventually, at least with the rahmah of Allah, get us a little bit of peace in Jannah. So, three things I want to emphasize. Just want to make sure when I'm switching slides, is that showing up on your screen as well?
Showing up clear, yes.
Okay, good. So the three compartments of life. This is based on my own life. And I came to this country, and I'm going to interlace again. I'm going to make sure that I also bring in some personal points of view, because I experienced a lot of these things. And this presentation is really based on some components that are part and parcel of my own life. Came to this country at the age of 14, didn't have my parents with me, didn't have any kind of guidance except the inner guidance that came from Allah, the guidance, and then the propensity always to bow to the worship of Allah as the most important ingredient in my growth, in my life, as well as in my protection against all the remnants and also the evils of this world. So that was my guidance, and that was basically my barometer and my compass in America. So these are the three components that really kept me going, and I think I've arrived at some point in my life where I feel kind of, mashallah, settled. Let's put it that way, settled, okay? I want to be moderate in my proclamations. So the first thing and the basis for all kinds of events in one's life on this earth, so we're talking about the earthly life, is really understanding what the whole meaning of life is about. What is the meaning of life? Why are we even here? If you don't have a good and very sound understanding of that, you don't have an anchor. There's no anchor, then, like the ship that does not have an anchor, the winds can blow it away from its position of security. It can be floating, it can be, it could be cracking, it could be any number of things can happen. It will not have any kind of sustenance, or at least, let's say, it will not have some kind of capacity to keep itself with integrity. It will not be an integral part of the ship, right? Or a boat, or any of those things that are set for sail in the water. So you have to have, and this is my own conviction, you have to have an understanding and anchorage of the meaning of life. So as Muslims, we have to know that Allah says, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So I have not created the jinn or the human being except that they worship. In other words, except that they have a purpose in life to worship me. So if we have that purpose, everything that we do stems from that purpose. So the purpose is the anchor. That is the solid foundation we have. So no matter what happens in the journey of life, we can always refer back to the point of our meaning in life. If that is the anchor, then we will never get lost. Just like the ship will never be blown away by a massive wind. Even if it is a little bit disturbed, it may just be swinging back and forth in the same area, but it will never really be detached or dislodged from its position of security. So that's the first thing we really have to have a better and successful life in this earth. The second thing is, once we have this understanding that Allah created us to worship Him first and foremost, everything else follows. Then second thing is to understand the system of life, because the system of life, basically what I mean by that is that it depends on what country you live, right? The countries that you live in will determine the laws, the culture, the rules, regulations, the legality, whatever it is, that determines your lifestyle as well as your conducting on that land, right? So the conduct that you manifest in that particular country will, of course, have to adhere to the rules and regulations of the country. But if you don't know the rules or regulations of that country, you don't know how the system is regulated or how the system functions. If you don't know how the system functions, you're just like that boat does not have an anchor. You get lost. You have to understand the system and to be able to function the system, and also at the same time take advantage of the system. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage of the system to benefit yourself and at the same time benefit humanity, society, and the larger world. You can do that, all right? So that's the second part, understanding the system of life. If you live in America, try to understand the American system. How does it work? What does it take to get to where you want to go? What are your goals? Are your goals set? Are they fixed? Are they flexible? Can they change? Will the rules and laws of the land allow you to do that? Get that straight in your head, because you need that, regardless of what career path you take. So understanding the system is very important. Don't focus on the little minute points that may be laid out in front of you in the path and journey of success. Focus on the collectives. Focus on those tasks that are kind of collectively held up in front of you. So try to understand that bigger picture. Don't focus too much on the details, because as I say, the details, that's where Shaitan resides, in the details that distract you and confuse you and also take you away from your path, which is a straight path, inshallah. So if you understand the system, then you understand the role that you play in that system. You know, this is a game of life, or a life full of games. A lot of what we do really are games, because they are transient, because our lives are transient. We don't have an everlasting life, and we don't have an everlasting earth or planet. And for that reason, our actions, our functions, our roles are finite. They are not indefinite. Okay? So if we know the roles that we play in our life, just like in the Quran, Surah Al-Imran says, not in Imran, Surah Al-Imran says, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعَ الْغُرُورِ. The life of this world is but a comfort of illusion. You know, it's like a mirage, right? You are in desert, you think you have, in the distance, you see some water, pool of water, you run directly into that, in that direction, you find out it's not really no water, it's just a reflection, right? In the desert. Life is likewise. It's a reflection of what it seems to be real and lasting, but it's not. It's just a reflection, an illusion. Whatever comfort you have in this life is an illusion. Okay, so those three components of life are important to understand what I'll be presenting following on. So let's talk in a little bit detail into those three components. What do we mean by understanding the meaning of life? In Surah Al-Dariyat, and I said already that Allah did not create us or the jinn except that they worship Him, right? In the very next surah, it says, in no way would I have from them any provision. In other words, Allah does not need any provision from us, right? It says, Ma uridu minhum min rizqin wa ma uridu an yut'imun. He doesn't need any sustenance. He doesn't need any provision from his creatures. He is the creator. He's a khaliq. We are makhluk, right? So in no way Allah would have any need for us. But in every way, we have a need for Him. We need Him for our sustenance, for our provision, for our life, for the sunlight that, the rays that come down from the sky, for the wind, the air, everything. We need Him. He's a sustainer. He's a provider. We are the recipients of His grace and mercy. So that is basically what this shows. So that is the first component that we have to really understand and also build our foundation on. The second thing is called the system of life. The system of life, if we look at it on the macro scale, on a very large scale, in terms of nationals or countries on the global kind of level, then we're looking at certain divisions or certain manipulations or certain strategies that are already laid out for people. Those who are in the what's called the core countries, the countries that seem to have the technology, they also have the higher skill, the well-developed kind of labor force, intensive capital system. They seem to want to rule the rest of the world, especially the developing, right? The developing world have low skills. They have labor-intensive production, right? Most of it is manual production for that matter, and then extraction of raw materials. So what developing countries usually have is raw materials, and the raw materials are needed by the developed countries to make sure that they can use them for the end product, right? So, and the labor-intensive aspect of the low-skilled labor in developing countries is not necessarily going to give them a better life at the minimum wage, at much insecure environment, hourly rates that are very much almost subservient level. So all those things considered. So you have to understand the geopolitical nature of this world. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, especially the youth going into different fields of discipline to study. Doesn't matter if you're going to be a medical doctor or any other kind of doctor or a historian or a journalist for that matter, or lawyer. It doesn't matter. You have to have some kind of global perspective because you want to understand the system, right? We're on the topic of the system. Understand the system. I listen to the news. I was listening to the news when I was 14 years old when I first came to this country. I said, okay, I want to get the information. This is a new country. There's a cultural shock. I need to understand exactly what really moves and shapes the events that are taking place around me or around the nation. I need to know. I actually read the Constitution. I wanted to understand what the Constitution says. I even tried to become almost like a read lawyer, a lawyer who's read, who's not necessarily, legally a lawyer, but then person who's well read in the jurisdiction as well as the constitutional articles of the country. I really wanted to understand what makes America tick, right? What does it make it kind of what are projected in the movies? What are the characteristics of the country, of the people living in the country? So those are the kind of things we have to understand. Even Mao in China, when he was, of course, the chairman of the Communist Party in China, he did divide the world into different countries, developed countries, developing countries. China was a part of a developing country. Now it is fast approaching that developed country aspect of it, even though it may not necessarily quite be there. So we need to understand who are the periphery nations, the nations that are dependent upon the technology, upon the advanced knowledge of this, core countries, developed countries in the Western world. They call themselves Western world. Why is that important? Because that will manifest itself in your own life. You're choosing a career. You're trying to get somewhere in your life. You're trying to develop some skill, right? You want to set yourself, well enough to settle in the future as well. And of course, if you're better off, you'll be good for your family, your children, at the same time, good for your, your parents as well. I mean, a lot of us are interdependent. So it's not just for yourself, it's extending beyond yourself. So we need to understand that aspect of the system, how the system works, then you can be better off for that. The other thing, of course, we have to also focus on it, what's the role now? Now you understand the meaning of life, you have a good foundation. The second thing is now you know how the system works, the country you live in, the society you live in, how the system works based on the rules and policies of that country, and then how you conduct yourself within those rules. And the next thing is, what is your role? What is your function? What is your contribution? And at the same time, how do you take advantage of the system? I'm not saying take advantage of the system to hurt the system or towards the system or to, have it in a lopsided kind of vision. I'm not talking about that. Take advantage of the system in such a way that it helps you, your family, legally and morally. At the same time, advance your cause within the system, work within the system. And that's exactly how other certain groups of people will do that. They come into this country, to America, they understand the system, the workings of the system, the gears of the system, and then the actual, functions of the system. And then they take advantage of it, and they're up there at the top. While the rest of the others, especially those of us coming from Africa and developing countries, we seem to just get into the system and then get absorbed by the system. And instead of trying to at least take advantage of the system takes advantage of us. We get buried. At the same time, we lose our culture and we get assimilated, and basically we become subservient to the system. We don't want that, all right? So understand your role. What's your responsibility? Okay, your responsibility is that you should always know better and more every day, every day of the week, every day of every week of the month, every month of the year. In other words, you should always be better, more knowledgeable today than you were yesterday. Otherwise, what's the difference between living yesterday and living today? You have to have a reason to move into the next day. Just like, you're in school, you are promoted from grade 1 to grade 2, you go all the way to middle school and high school, because you have achieved something, you've learned something, you've actually developed some skills, knowledge, what have you. Similarly, even if you're not judged on that level, you should always get some knowledge or some understanding of your environment, your surrounding, better today than yesterday, and definitely better next week than this week. So that's how you develop your arsenal of knowledge, and then your skill set. Eventually, that will help you to take advantage of the system. Okay, again, I'm saying taking advantage in a productive way, in a constructive way. Okay, so responsibilities are very important, and don't get upset. If your goals are not necessarily achieved, or if you are not setting new goals. Try to always maintain some kind of level that sustains you, that keeps you going. Steadiness is very important. In Islam, in Quran, many times mentioned. Steady prayer. You do a lot of prayer today and Sunnah and all that stuff, and then tomorrow you don't do as much. No, you don't. Allah wants steadiness in your life. So if you develop that kind of steady habit of learning, gathering knowledge, analyzing, critical thinking, critical analysis, then you don't get paralyzed from too much knowledge. Because if you try to analyze too much, you can paralyze analysis or paralysis through analysis. You don't want to do that. But if you gain a certain level of consistent knowledge, then you develop that what I call the know-how, so the point where you can actually understand the system and be in control of your life. You know, there's three types of people that I've always mentioned during my talks everywhere. The first type of people, or the class of people, are those who make things happen, those who produce stuff, you know, for the society, the world, everything. They are in control because they make things happen. The second type of people are those who watch things happen, the spectators, the ones not necessarily involved, the ones in the stands, not the ones on the playing on the court, the one where activity is going on. No, the ones in the stands, the ones the spectators, those who watch things happen. So the third type of people are those who wonder what happened. They have no clue at all. They are not involved in the spectatorship. They're not involved in the actual playing and the court. They have no clue. They're completely out of the whole event. Those are the ones who will be taken advantage of. Those are the ones who will become subservient. The ones who will be in the position of almost, slave condition. They may not know about it, but that's how the contractors above, they actually deal with the system. So we don't want to be in that group of people. We don't want to be clueless. That's why we need to listen to the news. Of course, we have to read between the lines as well. We have to extract what is important. What is, we have to read between the lines to understand what is, just nothing there except, phantom kind of news, and what is real news. And we have to, of course, select a bunch of news sources. We don't want to be, getting all our news from social media. Of course not. Please, that's a lot of unregulated news. Sometimes managed news. Managed means somebody's controlling the flow of news, but sometimes unregulated, that means scattered. It's like entropy. In physics, you have chaos. That's kind of news you don't want. You're not going to get any information from that. So responsibility is very important. We talked about don't get upset if you don't achieve your goals, because you have immediate goals and you have long-term goals. Don't get upset, because if you get upset, basically there's three things that follow by being upset. You get upset, that means you have some kind of unfulfilled expectation. If you have unfulfilled expectation, that means you've not really planned it out well. Okay. The other thing that you have is undelivered communication. If you're upset, you lose control. If you lose control, then your communication is not going to be really robust. It may be uncharacteristic, or you might actually be uttering things that are not helpful. Okay, so you don't want to be in that kind of situation either. But at the same time, responsibility is what you really should hold dear to your heart. Because if you're responsible, then you always manage your behavior. You always manage your conduct. But at the same time, you will be able to communicate with others without being or forcing or imposing certain attitudes on them. So that's very important to understand. So we covered to summarize and maybe to review, the meaning of your life has to really be anchored. Understanding of the meaning of your life. And as Muslims, of course, the worship of Allah is the foremost and number one understanding of the meaning of our life. We are here in transient form and will return back to Him, right? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. The second thing is to understand the system in which you live on this earth. What is the system? What is it about? If I understand the system, then I'll be able to operate within that system legally and morally. At the same time, not damaging myself or my future, but taking advantage of the system. And then the third thing, of course, is what is my role? How do I move forward? How do I get the knowledge I have accumulated to work for and to work for society and the world at large? All right? All right, so here, how to understand your role in the choices you make. If we don't have choices, that means we cannot be held accountable for things we decide to do. But Allah made sure we have a lot of choices. Even He made sure whether to accept Him as the creator, as the provider, as the sustainer, or to reject Him. He gave that freedom to us, right? Even that choice, that is anchored your understanding foundation of life, why you are in this life in the first place, even that is given to you as a choice. All right. So if we have that kind of choice, then the responsibility rests on us. So whatever choice you take, whatever path you take, that responsibility is on you. Don't blame anybody else for that. Don't call out others because of your own choices. So man is not fully conditioned and determined. This is a person. His name is Viktor Frankl. This guy, he's a Jewish guy. He's a survivor of the Holocaust. And when they were killing his wife and destroying his family and himself, he just never gave up, no matter what they did to him. They wanted to crush his spirit. And then they wanted to, of course, also to remove his consciousness altogether. But he held up amazingly. The reason is that he knew that they could not influence him as much as that they believed that they could. He empowered himself. He made sure that I can determine my future despite what's going on around me, despite the forces that are attacking me or the forces that are trying to destroy me. So determining what course you take in life rests upon you. Of course, Allah has given us the freedom. And then we say it's maktub. Yes, it's maktub, but only Allah knows exactly where you're going to go, what's going to happen to you, and eventually where you're going to land. But you might not know, right? Since you might not know, you still have a choice, either to go in this way or in that way. But eventually, you have to take the responsibility of the decisions that you make. You don't want to be in a situation like this guy is, where he is trapped. If he's trapped, that means he has to only take one option. There's no other option. All right. I think I heard the azan. I may have to step away for maybe 5 minutes because we have to pray now Maghrib, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, Assalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay, I think I stopped at the point where if you're trapped in the conditions that you are in, and then at the same time you don't have any choice, then definitely you're trapped. But we're not really trapped unless we have to prospectively view our options in our mind as being trapped. Okay, so let's move on. Now, this is what I call a personal agency. You know, sometimes you have agents that conduct business on the basis of what is given to them by the owners of an association or an organization. Sometimes you become an agent of a non-profit organization. I used to be an agent of a non-profit organization that had the 501c. That means that particular organization was represented by me. So if you can represent organizations and other agencies or other entities, why can't you represent yourself? Why can't you be your own personal agent? That's why we need to define it. What is a personal agency? It's a conception of ourselves as agents, and this is propelled, not only impelled, but propelled by self-generated intentions. You know, in the 40 hadith, as we know that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has stated in so many hadith, the intentions are extremely important. In fact, in the 40 hadith, the first hadith that was mentioned was, if you remember very well here, is إنما الأعمال بالنيات is very, very central to the whole conduct of one's own personal affairs in Islam, right? إنما الأعمال بالنيات. You are judged by the intentions that you declare. The intention you declare to yourself, nobody else. Nobody knows your intentions except Allah. So this is basically similar in the way that agency is formed. You become your own agent. You look after your conduct. You also look after your affairs, but your affairs have to be within the realm of the societal norms. Of course, cannot be violating any of those norms or laws or rules or policies, what have you. So let me give you examples when you are practicing personal agency. Let's say an example, especially which is practical, and not only practical, but some things that's relevant to the youth, right? We are speaking to the youth right now. So let's say you have a good intention to do well in class, and this specific subject matter gives you some trouble, in spite of the fact that you're being also tutored by a teacher who's helping you on the side. You could design a destiny of poor academic performance, or just leave it up to the circumstances you find yourself in. So one thing we have to remember, my brothers and sisters, the youth I'm talking to right now, is that circumstances do not necessarily change. Circumstances are there. Do not blame the circumstances. Okay, sometimes you may not necessarily have much to do with the circumstances, but your view of the circumstances, what will eventually change your behavior, what will empower you, what will give you the control, your view, the way you look at your attitude towards those circumstances. For example, I have a calculator near me and I'm holding this calculator. It is a calculator. There's nothing I can do about that. It is circumstance in which I find myself with a calculator. I cannot change this circumstance. It is a calculator. So don't try to change people. Don't try to change the nature of other organisms, not just people. Could be other living things, could be animals, or it could be even a little ant. Those are the circumstances that you have found yourself in. That is the hegemony and also the domain of our Creator. So the same thing now. The circumstance you find yourself in right in school is that you're doing poorly academically, right? You still are not finding any solace. So if you resign. So if you resign, that's an option you take. The other option you could have taken was, well, you know what? I will go beyond these circumstances I find myself in. I'll go to the library. I'll go to the website. I'll go to YouTube, any number of sources where I can enhance my understanding of that subject matter. This day and age, I don't think any student has an excuse at all. In those days when we were growing up, in middle school or elementary or all the way in high school, even in college, undergraduate, we didn't have any computers. We don't have any access to the internet-controlled websites or domains. No, we have information at the tips of your finger. We didn't have that. We had either to go to the library and then go through and then probably browse through the materials that are in the books, very old books, the information outdated. You guys have everything, not just in the computer, you have it in the palm of your hand. You have it right there. You possess the information right away. In fact, you don't even have to type in. You can speak directly into the microphone on your cell phone, mobile phone, and immediately get the information you need, right? Siri or Google Assist or whatever it's called, Amazon, Alexa, whatever her name is, all those things are accessible to you. So there's no excuse, is what I'm saying. If I had an excuse, or if there was anyone at the age of 14 years old, coming into this country, not knowing anything at all, the language is okay because I went to English school in Ethiopia, but I went, 9th grade is when the government grabbed me and took me into the rural areas to advance literacy, what is called the literacy campaign, or called Zamacha. At that, I was 13 or so at that time. And so that kind of tumultuous life at an early age did not spoil my future life. It did not give me the excuse to say, you know what, I went through this trauma, I went through this is the reason that the government sent us back after a year was because some of the kids, I call them kids at that time, we were all kids, at that age, they were killed by what are called balabatuch, or the landlords whose lands were being confiscated by the communist government. So the government took us back to our cities. So at that time, while I was still in the Zamacha, I knew that my future depended on the education that I received. My father was also, Rahim. My father was adamant that I also still conducted my education, even under those very strenuous circumstances, in a rural area called Wurgesa, Wallo. And the only thing that was lighting up at 9 o'clock in the evening was a little, hut that happened to be in the middle of the road, and that controlled the lighting system for the whole village. It was a village. And so I was studying under candles at night. And then I was communicating and then taking correspondence with Oxford University. Remember, I just started 9th grade. I did not enter 10th grade, never got in 11th grade, 12th grade. 10, 11, 12th grade, never attended. I just started 9th grade. I did not even finish 9th grade. But through that kind of correspondence, I was eventually, when the government took us back into Addis Ababa or our respective cities, I went to the Piazza, it's the English Council, I think the British Council. That's where you could sit down and take what's called the General Certificate of Education, GCE, ordinary and advanced. I took the ordinary. That is the high school passing, equivalent to a high school passing exam. I was 13, 14, and I took it. I did well enough, and then I applied to overseas, America and Alabama. I got full scholarship. So that's how I came at the age of 14. So I could have said, excuse, well, I went to Zamacha and I missed the best prime years of my life, so I could not continue to do my education because I didn't go to 10th grade, 11th. I could have had all kinds of excuses. I never let any excuse stop me. Alhamdulillah. Of course, the push from my father was also very helpful. So we want to have parents that are pushy in the right direction. That not only guide us, because they also provide us at the same time some of the lessons that they learned in their own turbulent lives. A lot of them have experienced similar things as I have experienced. So you should always respect their conditions and learn from them as well. So that's how I came. And then how did I come here? Through full scholarship. And the money that I saved, I had scholarship after scholarship, even when I was still a student. I was the #1 student in college at that age. And the scholarship money that I saved in my bank account and on Saturdays where I would go to deposit, because I used to get paid every week because I also was working at, it's called work study in the library of the school I was attending in Alabama. And I was making enough money. And then the foundation were giving me money. So all that money that I saved in the bank, every time I go to Saturday, the teller would tell me, hey boy, you always go to the deposit slips. We also have withdrawal slips over there. Why don't you just, withdraw some, have fun, you're a kid, enjoy your life. I said, excuse me, I'm not interested in withdrawal slips. I'm only interested in deposit slips. So I did deposit everything. The money I accumulated was so large. When I told my father, you know what? He said, I want you to get some of the other siblings out of the country. So I paid for their education even before they came. So I basically subsidized my siblings, about seven of them, to come to this country. I'm sure some of them are maybe listening, I'm not sure. But this is the truth. So I helped them. And so what I'm saying is that I didn't have any green card. I was not born as a citizen like some of you are. You are citizens fully, American born maybe, or Canadian born, or Australian born, wherever you may be listening to this presentation. Don't let any excuses stand in your way of your achievement, of your destiny. Allah gave you all the tools that you need. It's up to you to figure out and to plan to succeed. If you do not plan to succeed, you will definitely plan to fail. If you don't plan to succeed, you'll plan to fail. So let's go back to the subject matter here. You have to be your own personal agent. If you're a personal agent of your own affairs, your own conditions, then you are at the steering wheel. You're driving, and the destiny that you eventually will get to will be determined by your journey. Of course, Allah eventually will make it either successful and not successful. But if you're not successful, it's just like if you are kicked down or if you fall, you have to lift yourself up, just rise up and try again. The woman who put the film, the movie, what is that movie? The very famous movie. She's a British woman, Harriet Porter, but I don't know the name of it. Anyway, I'm sure you're probably laughing because I don't watch movies. But she went to almost every known publisher in England to get her book published. And I believe it was the 78th time she tried. The 78th publisher she approached finally said, okay, we'll give you a chance, and let's see what you have written. And that book that she wrote, of course, made her a billionaire now. Not only the book was published, it became one of those most popular books of all time, but at the same time, it was, it was translated into many languages and eventually made into a film, a movie. Forgot the name of it again, as I said. Anyway, so you have to keep knocking on the door of opportunity. Opportunity is staring at you, but it needs some kind of, pushing, some kind of movement or stimulation. And that's exactly what you need to do. As a Harari, your success is extremely crucial. It is essential, not only for the survival of our own population, but for the rigor, at the same time, advancement of our culture in the future, especially in the future kids. We don't want to lose our culture or our foundation, our being. So it's very important. Be your own personal agent. Don't be influenced by your peer pressure. You don't have to conform to the peer pressure if it's a negative one. Try to be a leader in a group setting. Don't necessarily follow blindly. Ask questions, interrogate as much as possible, but make sure that it settles in your heart and your mind accepts, right? Your mind is the command center. The command center says, this is not good, don't get involved. If the command center says, because it is the command center talk to the heart as well. As long as that communication still goes on, I don't think you'll go wrong. Because as I said, I was 14 at that time. I don't have an advisor. I don't have my parents to go and get guidance for every little thing that comes into my life. Allah was my guide. Wallahi, Allah was my guide. As long as I was doing my salat, and I was always praying, and I was crying, and I was always, asking for help from him. Before I left the country, I had written about, 20 things I wanted to do in my life. Alhamdulillah, 20 things. The only thing I did not accomplish by the time I graduated with my master's degree was marriage, which we'll talk about later. Everything else Allah gave me. Everything else. I wanted to get my master's. I never thought I was going to get, I'm not even thinking about doctorates or what have you, because at that time, as a 13 or 12-year-old boy, what is a doctorate? It was I never thought about it. I just thought master's degree was the highest. So whatever I wrote down, I have accomplished. But goal is not about accomplished goals of the past, or life is not about just accomplished goals of the past. Life is about setting another goal. As long as you are alive, you have to set new goals, goal after goal after goal until you die. Then there's no more goal to adhere to or to work for. Anyway, so you have to be your own personal agent. Don't be influenced by others. Be a leader, and always make sure that you are in the right path. You're following your heart and your mind the same. So innamal a'malu binniyah is basically whatever good intentions, hopefully, that you have, that will be credited by Allah. Whatever bad intentions you have, even if you don't implement them, you will still not get negative credits. So intention is very important. The choices you make, of course, will determine the fate of your life. The consequences are definitely going to be manifested, right? Choose your friends very carefully. I never really thought that I had friends, and I had people, that companions that I kept company or I interacted with, or stuff like that. But friends are extremely rare these days because they require a complete set of criteria to be a friend, right? So you make sure those friends are the ones who are going to help you in your path to success. You don't want friends that are going to inhibit you, impede you, or hold you back. You don't want that. The same way, if you happen to hang around a garbage can for a long time, and then you walk away from that garbage can, you're going to smell garbage. People are going to say, this guy is trash because he smells garbage. So if you are with those kind of people who are always negative, or are backbiting, or they're not good to, for no reason, or idle talking, whatever it is that Islam does not necessarily encourage, then you become one of them, right? Just listening to all that kind of rubbish will influence your mind, and eventually you become a habitual person in that sphere. in that particular sphere, you'll be trapped in that sphere, and your thoughts, your conduct, your behavior will reflect that. So you always want to make sure you have the right set of friends that help you, that support you in your path, greater things, to achieve greater heights. Okay, cultivate your passion. You have a good passion. I ask my little children here, I say, what do you want to be in the future? Oh, I want to be, one of them said, I want to be, what do you say, a horse rider. I said, no, it's not bad, horse rider. Why do you want to ride a horse? Because I could be a good friend with my horse. Of course, we're talking in Harari. My children know Harari, alhamdulillah, very well. They're fasih in that department. But I'm telling you, million فرس العيبة مليت تاع فرسو دلاغا خا من سلم دخشاوس ملي انت فرس سكتو ملتا طبيعي ذو كلهم عم بخت كحلي فركال عم بيعمل خوغر عم بيحطب خوغر عم بيلعب بي زلل خوغر حشي مخلو ميل تسيلا خنال ازبي فرس ما حمتا وروق التامليت خش خوغر فز بين سكن من انا بايتيت حتى بزو ناشو مينا اخام ترانسبورتيشن فيولز تبور دغروم فوسيل فيولز بور دالالو Fuse at Abora de Group at Haribaga Kukuna. I never discourage. Oh, mashallah. I hope let's see. 10 years from now, you still, are you gonna keep that or are you gonna change your mind? It's okay to change your mind. You can have a different passion. Because the passion usually is something that you are aware of, or something that you have developed because you became maybe familiar with a certain thing, with certain event. You've seen something. People go to the museum, you look at all these old planes hanging in the ceiling, and then all of a sudden, oh, I want to be an astronaut, And then they cultivate their way through. So depending on what you're exposed to, and your parents have to do this job, they have to expose you to a lot of things. As parents, our duty is to expose our children to a lot of things. Not being doctor only, forget that part. In fact, we need to have a balance of journalists. We need to have engineers. We have to have architects and social workers and what have you. We have to have a whole mix of things. Otherwise, you cannot build a nation. You cannot be the king of all blind people or going the same narrow road. No, you don't want to do that. And also think beyond yourself. Always, whatever you do in life, you want to be great enough so that you can be of value to others around you. The essence of life, sadaqatul jari'a, is when you have lived your life, you leave a legacy that's perpetual, never limited or bounded by time. You leave it behind. This is after you're even dead. You're gone, and in the youth, you have the whole oasis right in front of you. The whole world is open. Don't be limited in your thoughts. Don't be limited the capacity that you may have in the future. You might want to be the president of the United States. Dream big. Nothing should stop you from dreaming big. There's nothing that says that, no, you cannot dream. Don't let anybody steal your dream. Dream as high, as wide, at the same time, as deep as you want to. Make sure that it is beyond yourself. In other words, it has to be something good for society. Something that empowers not only you, but the underprivileged, the underserved, the ones that have been neglected, the ones on the periphery of the society. Help them out too, because this is your call. To you, you have some function and some role to play in this life, right? So the choices you make and the roads that you travel will determine the fate that you have. Even though we keep saying it's maktub, but since you don't know which was, the maktub is only Allah has known it, but you don't know where it is. But Allah does not stop you from trying. Keep trying, and eventually it will open up for you. So you don't want to take this middle road, of course, where you'll be confused. You don't know where it's going. This one is where you want to have a straight path. And of course, there will be all kinds of impediments, obstacles along the way. You have to challenge, you'll be challenged. You'll be challenged in life. Life is all about challenges. The way I look at life, it is really facing challenges, maintaining your steadiness, and at the same time, always envisioning that you will overcome those challenges. You have to think you will overcome them. in the Quran, some ayahs, they even tell you there may be so many sufferings and so many torturous journeys and what have you. But after this big storm, there's a calmness that comes after that. But who is really able to tolerate the storm, to fight through the storm and have vision and confidence to think, you know what, this storm is temporary, it's transient, it's not going to stick around too long. How many people have that kind of courage? Courage is something you have to earn. You have to earn it. It's not given to you, it's not fed into you. You have to earn courage. As young people, you have so many avenues to develop courage, to develop and build good character. So if you go through this, and then you look at this, small feet, small steps, a journey of 1,000 miles, says the Chinese proverb, right? Start with the first step. 1,000 miles, start with the first step. Make sure your steps are correct, in the right direction to reach your goal. And then staying on track with healthy habits. We'll talk about nutrition later on. And then the success road can be seen. You can actually observe it. You can have a glimpse of it. See? When I got promoted to the highest office in the university, and they said all kinds of good things from the president on down, I said, there must be another goal after this. And I was told that as an academician in the biomedical field, this is the highest. You cannot go any further. I said, well, no, there must be another thing, another goal. Otherwise, my life stops right now. There's nothing to look forward to. That is life. Life is not Jannah. Jannah, maybe you can sit idle, rest, maybe get everything that you want, at the call of your voice, or at the tip of your finger, for that matter. Life is not like that. Life is never stopping the journey that you travel. Never stop. Success after success doesn't matter. In fact, failures are the ones that are going to push you forward, not necessarily the successes. The successes may spoil you and may actually trap you, might put pressure on your mind. And then other people may also view that success is the end game of all. No, it's not. Success is a road that opens another challenge. It keeps you kind of stimulated, inspired, and you move on. And success does not come easy. All right. Personal responsibilities are very important. Forgot about this one. This is something I took from when I was writing about nutrition. I took this from the government website. The government had the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, usually puts out this daily standard allowances for food, what you should be eating, whole grains, nuts, legumes, stuff like that. But they don't necessarily do a good job of filtering out those commercial things in between. So I didn't like that. So for some reason I forgot it. I didn't want to use this for you guys. But if you guys are interested in keeping track of on your cell phone, the good kinds of items, or especially food items that you want to grab, if you can go to this website, it's called choosemyplate.gov, the USDA website, and there's an app that you can download onto your mobile phone, and then it tells you what good nutritious food you should be taking in. Okay, about that later on, inshallah. Your personal responsibilities, right? The foundations that you set for your life will determine how high you're going to go. If you have a good foundation, you can actually spring way up, right? Like a springboard. If you have a very weak foundation, you can't even get off that, right? Because the springboard is loose and the actual metals are not connected well, and you don't have a bolt that keeps everything together, right? So you have to, what I call prerequisites. What are the prerequisites? As I mentioned, I'm reviewing them to you now. Get some kind of meaning for your life. Meaning as a Muslim is that, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We did not create you except for the purpose you worship me. So your life should be the pleasure of your creator. Whatever you do, it has to be for the pleasure of it. If you do everything for the pleasure of your Lord, your creator, then you don't have to worry about anything else. The society will be taken care of, your family will be taken care of, because Allah would always want you to do something morally and societally, well, and good things. So the whole idea of Islam is submission to the will of your Creator, Allah. Why is it called Islam? There's a root meaning of that too as well, right? Salam, peace, right? You have peace because you give everything to Allah. You please Him. That's you're slave to only Him. You're not slave to any material belongings. You're not slave to any kind of movie stars or celebrities. You're not a slave to your job. I mean, the job you still have to do. Duty is still necessary to advance in this life, right? But you don't have to worship any of that stuff. Some people spend so much time taking care of their home, their car. Sometimes they don't take care of their health. It's like worshiping those things, when you overdo it. So you have to have meaning for your life. And then you also have to understand the system in which you live, right? The system is going to dictate to you how to conduct yourself. You cannot be driving 75 miles an hour in a zone that only demands 50 miles per hour, right? If you get caught, then of course you're violating the rules. As a system, you should know the system. And if you want to advance your career, and what does it really need? What kind of skill set are needed? Skill set are needed in this particular profession? Get the education you need, right? In the old days, they would pay for you, but these days you have to pay for yourself. Now, I'm talking to the parents now. Parents living in America, please try your best to make sure that you instill in your kids the discipline to learn, to get knowledge, to advance their critical thinking abilities, their problem-solving abilities, so that when they get to the point of high school, they do so well on SAT and ACT. Eventually, they should be getting a scholarship. They are citizens, right? Let them get a scholarship to enter college without you having to fork out any penny at all. You should not have any penny to fork out to them because it's very expensive. Your whole total savings will be depleted. Please get them the right path, get them strong enough academically so that when I hear about all this, friends of mine, doctors, a lot of them are doctors, and I'm talking about Habasha, Gisu, and others, and they have to pay a lot of money for their kids, for undergraduate education. Why? This shouldn't be the case. Make sure that they are good enough to get scholarship. And another thing I want to remind Harari twice now, unresa. Yeah, متملأ زال بتاعي فورماش بي أي إنتنا بلو بملو أي إنتخو أزو مخاد نخفركمين أزو بحل أخام بجي حين تأبزاش لا شو أشياش حقو درس لي أخني سكراشي بأخني تاش نهو بوزال الدي بعد ولد ولداش أما بيتنافو بو قرقار موش حالي ما قوف حل بنا يتنافو بو ألاي من يا تاكس محلات كفلو زا قلت ألاي ومن محل خو بيتا يتنافو زال محل خو بينتا تجيه بعد يحضر مع حرب ياش زالو كله شو يقل زالو محل خوبيت ازواتي محل قمتا انت اين سنو ان مخالي البنام ازو كتبي ولا سناهم تم شما محلك بيجي بوغا سكراشي بيجي بوغا كل متفتح رمان تجي من صح البن لخو زغزول انت take advantage of the system that's available, making things available to you. Take advantage of it. As minorities, take advantage of the system that says minorities have certain privileges now because they have been robbed of their privileges, of their rights and their humanity, everything else in the past. Now is a little bit of the, not repenting, they're not repenting, but at least they're trying to make up for it. I don't know for how long, it may not last, depending on who administration it's going to be next time. Take advantage of it in the 4 years or 3 years that this administration is in. It's opening up. You don't know, because this life. Life is never constant, right? Life is never constant. It's up and down, tribulations. So make sure you know your role in this life, all right? So keep staying on the track. Now, the promotion for the seminar, of course, dealt with nutrition, radio frequency matters, marriage, attitudes. Now that I covered one thing that I really wanted to instill in you as youth, whatever that you're going through right now, I probably have already gone through. So that's why I understand. I can communicate with you. And whatever I'm saying is directly coming from my heart. I want you to learn from the mistake that I make, and I'll tell you what those mistakes are. At the same time, I want you to improve on those things that I have excelled in, you know, because excellence is not something that's stationary. It goes up on a tangent, and it can be achieved by anyone, as long as you have a discipline, a schedule, and a budget. I'm not talking about budget in terms of financial budget. I'm talking about budget of time. Do you know how to budget your time? I used to put down every minute of the day what I was going to do. That's how strict I was on my schedule. You know, these days I'm not that good. But in the past, when I was by myself, nobody knew me, and I don't have any community center to work in, or interact with other people, or not many friends, what have you. I really was concentrating on my study, and I wanted to budget my time. When people are budgeting their finances, I don't know what they were talking about. Finance, what do you have to budget your finance? You either have it or you don't have it. That's what I used to think. But time is something that slips away every second. Right now, I'm talking to you. 5 minutes later, that time will never come back in my life, or in your life, when nobody's life will ever come back. That's the only thing I can really budget, because it is a fleeting moment. It decays, just like a radioactive material decays. And the half-life of a radioactive material, of course, is the amount of time. Half of it will be destroyed or decay. Similarly, time is like that. Stay on the course. So let's talk about this nutrition, radio frequency, which is mostly your cell phones, and marriage attitudes. I was told that marriage is becoming a big obstacle, or a big, let's say, challenge for some of you. I'm surprised. How is that? Challenge in terms of finding a good mate, or challenge in terms of postponing, like I did? Learn from my mistake. I kept postponing marriage. I say, until I get the perfect person. Perfect in what sense? Well, person who is going to be in the same mindset as I am in terms of education, somebody who's going to have similar views or some perspectives about raising kids. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage. Well, we'll talk about that. I'm jumping the gun. Let's just focus on nutrition now. All right, so nutrition, what is that? Now, if you have settled your mind and your body to the anchor of your life, which is the meaning of life, and then you determine that you can now play a role in the system you live in, whether Australia, Canada, Ethiopia, or Wallo, Wurgesa, for that matter. Because I was giving a talk some time ago, and somebody from Wurgesa called to ask a question. Excuse me, there's a phone in Wurgesa? Sir, you left the country a long time ago. A lot of things are happening. I said, mashallah. So somebody might be listening from Wallo. So nutrition, you are what you eat. You heard that phrase for a long time, right? It's not an empty phrase. You are what you eat. If you don't eat, what happens? Your body will basically break up, decompose, and eventually become dead material, and that's it, if you don't eat at all. So the reason we are eating is to maintain that body. You know, some people think, or we're eating to live, right? Somebody made a mistake and he put down, we are living to eat. I said, no, you cannot. If you're living to eat, that means you have no purpose at all. You are living to eat does not make sense at all. But you are eating to live, right? But you don't want to just exist. If you just want to exist for some time, then you can eat all the junk you want. You can eat all the hamburger in the convenience, stores, convenient food markets, right? 7-Eleven or whatever they call them, right? If you want to exist. Now, you can choose to exist on a shoestring of budgets because you don't want to spend enough money on really healthy food. But then at the same time, remember, you may have a short leash on life, right? That life is going to be limited, because even if that life is prolonged by will of Allah, that may not be a quality life. You may have all kinds of chronic conditions, right? In America, if you are 50 and above, the chronic conditions set in, the chronic hypertension, high blood pressure, the chronic diabetic, not acidosis, but diabetic conditions or diabetes. Type 1 right now with children, but in the old days, type 2 used to be just limited to the old people above, a certain age, 25 or above. But now type 2 is setting in the children. So that means obesity is the main cause of not hypertension alone, diabetes, the cholesterol, the level of cholesterol in our body, and also the what's called metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is when you have all these conditions that are related to malfunctioning of your physiological organs. The organs that are supposed to have optimal physiological conditions, they're out of whack. They're not working correctly. So you have all these conditions. We'll talk about that later on. So you want to make sure that, you're young right now. I'm talking to the youth right now. You're going to get old. Now, if you live long enough to be 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90, you may encounter these conditions unless you take some steps right now, unless you preempt that kind of what I call derailing lifestyle. You have to stop that kind of lifestyle. As I said, you are the food that you consume. The food influences the mind and the body. If you have good food, there are neurotransmitters that feed on good food, and they are endorphins, and sometimes we call them enkephalins. They are extremely important for the sustenance of your body and your metabolic regulation. You want to also at the same time have a functional cognition. Cognition basically means your mind has to function optimally the way it's supposed to. You know what they say about the graveyard? A lot of treasure is buried in the graveyard. Why is that? Because those minds, those brilliant minds, never been used. The potential for this discovery of a cure for cancer may actually be in the burial ground. So those people who never really use their minds, what Allah has given them, what Allah has bestowed upon them. You might be the one who's going to find the cure for cancer. I'm still struggling to do that, spending a lot of my life doing that. Maybe you are the one of you. Okay? You just have to use your intellect and at the same time your brain, because your brain is like a computer with microcircuitry that is using a lot of energy. That's why you have these computers that are exuding all kinds of heat, right? Your mind is like that. That's why glucose can never be interrupted in terms of the blood flow of glucose into the brain. Otherwise, you're going to have a stroke. What is a stroke? A stroke is like a heart attack in the brain. You don't want to have that. And children are having cardiovascular problems and dysfunctions right now. So, and then we see a lot of children these days of Habesha or Zharari origin that are actually obese. The BMI, the massive intolerance of the calories in their diet. Okay, some of you are taking soda. That's not good for you. Do you know the content? Do you read the back label, what it says in terms of the ingredients? Next time, if maybe you have, some of you have it in the home right now. Just pick up that can that you have. It doesn't have to be Coke. It doesn't have to be Pepsi. It could be any number of those soft drinks. Look in the black box, if there's a black box. There is an ingredient box somewhere. Read it. If there are certain chemicals that you cannot read or you cannot pronounce correctly, and they happen to be in the first spot on the list, then you're really drinking toxic material. You're basically damaging your body, your cells. Okay, you're basically shortening your life. Okay, especially look out for something called preservatives, called high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup, and I advise a lot of other In fact, medical students, I had on Tuesday, I was teaching 126 medical students. We started school on July 14th. So we're really actively teaching now. And I was talking to them about vitamin D as a steroid hormone. It's not just a vitamin, it has a receptor and it can go into the nucleus and it can actually stimulate transcription of certain genes, influences all kinds of genes. And then I was also talking about vitamin D. The best way to get vitamin D is sunlight exposure. Half an hour, maybe or so, every 2 days is fine. Okay, but the reason I'm mentioning these things is that vitamin D itself can be corrupted by high fructose corn syrup. Your absorption of sunlight and the UVB, that means ultraviolet radiation, the B component, there's a C component which is used for neutralizing and antiviral activity. A is another one also that's used, but the B is what you want, the ultraviolet light of short, not short, but the B part component is what absorbs under the skin, and it changes what's called the 7-dehydrocholesterol into vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is the one that you want in your body, sometimes called cholecalciferol. Okay, so anyway, that's beside the point. But if you drink soda, high fructose corn syrup, it will interfere with the absorption and process of vitamin D. You think that can is going to tell you that information? They're not going to tell you that. You think your doctor, your physician is going to tell you that? He may not know. The reason I know, I'm a researcher too, right? I'm in the scientific research. So I read research papers, what come out, regularly. And at the same time, it's amazing that I'm still having my eye vision. I don't wear glasses. Why do you think that's the case? Because I learned a long time ago exactly how as you age, we are all aging, as you age, your eyesight is going to go down. You become myopic and you'll not be able to have a strong vision. I read that a long time ago. So every time I read a lot. I read every page I turn, I look away from the page because I want to make sure that my lens does not contract constantly and frequently. I also want to relax it so the muscles do not get trapped in one kind of position. That has allowed me to always keep my vision still strong, alhamdulillah. But in other words, what I'm telling you is that if you have a good lifestyle, if you have good knowledge that you put into practice, you don't need to see a doctor. I see a doctor every year. Why? Physical examination is extremely important. Screening is very important for any number of health conditions. Because you can get early detection of some disease or some precancerous state. Is always, you never know. So always go and get physical examination, even if you don't have an insurance. Okay. So I think we're kind of low on time. So let me just go and zip through some of these things. So as they say, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. You're trying to find a cure. Isn't it better or easier to just avoid COVID-19 virus, what is known as SARS virus, the severe acute respiratory virus? Isn't it easier, better to avoid it altogether, to prevent yourself from ever getting it, as opposed to getting it and then finding a cure? Why is that important? Even if you got mild viral infection from this particular virus, in whose pandemic we are all suffering, or under whose pandemic we are all suffering, if you get mild ones like a flu-like symptoms, headache, running nose, rhinorrhea, or something like that, and then you feel better, 6 months later, only Allah knows what happens. I just got a grant from the National Institute of Health, which is a government agency, to study long haulers, those long COVID or post-COVID. You call them post-acute sequela of SARS virus infection. That means an ounce of prevention is better than even a cure, even if you're cured by your immune system, even if you have a natural immunity. They still advise that you to go and take the vaccination, right? 6 months, 8 months down the road, we don't know, this is a new disease. And the vaccination is also new. Okay, the vaccination is based on the spike protein. That's the same protein that attaches to the host cell, right? There was called the ACE2 receptor. That protein is being injected. Synthetic protein, spike protein, even though through messenger RNA is eventually translated, still the spike protein is going to be all over the place. So even those of us who are vaccinated, we don't know what's going to happen to us 7, 8, 9 months later, because the spike protein is all of it may not be neutralized by the stimulated antibody production in the body, in our body. So we don't know. So there are a lot of unknowns, okay? So don't get your hopes so high, all of a sudden you'll be disappointed. There's so many unknowns. So the best you can do as youth is to protect yourself from any disease, whether it is man-made disease or natural disease that goes through the natural history of diseases. It doesn't matter, always prevention is better. The best way to prevent is to have good nutrition. Take vitamin D if you can, 5, 10, I don't know, 1,000 in the international units a day. Get sunlight exposure outside. Maximum use of the summer, daylight savings time. Get your skin exposed. Okay, I can talk about nutrition all day long, but you also have to attach it to some other things that are just as important, like vitamin D, vitamin C. We have. You also want to have your immune system very robust, right? In times like this, when a viral infection is rampant and unruly, right? You also want to have a good memory, cognition. You want to make sure that female fertility, does not decline in their 20s, in their 30s. Usually it declines after 35. But the kind of food you eat may actually accelerate the fertility condition. The menopause may be condition also, may be tampered. Age-related diseases, nearsightedness, macular degeneration, all those things can be sped up if you are not taking care of your body and your mind at an early age, this age right now. I don't know, our beautiful moderator, Ammar, I don't know how old he is, but I want the best for him in the future. His speech, his dua, everything is fantastic, mashallah. But even for him to do ibadah and to do salat with khushu', with total concentration, he has to have a healthy mind. He has to have a healthy body, right? Mind over matter, or it doesn't matter at all, right? The mind is the command center, the body follows, but at the same time, they both have to be congruous to each other. They have to be in alignment with each other. You cannot just take care of your mental attitude and then forget about your lower latitude, the body, the rest of the body. You cannot do that. You have to take care of everything together. Mind, body, soul, spirit, everything, including the flesh, have to be taken care of at the same time. And then your hair starts to thin and gray in your 30s and 40s, right? This is the aging process. Now, there's nothing we can do about aging. Even our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said in a hadith that black seed, that black seed is called, that can cure just about any disease except age or death, rather death, right? The same thing. Aging is something that all of us will go through eventually before death approaches us. So, nutrition, what do we need nutrition? Good nutrition. I'm not going to go through the details of it because we don't have time. Vegetables, heavy on vegetables, please. Diet, heavy on vegetables, heavy on fruits. When we talk about fruits and vegetables, different variety of colors. Don't have to know about which vitamin, which is a vitamin B source, which is, tetrahydrolate or folic acid source, which is a good one for flavonoids. I'm not going to bore you with that kind of stuff. So let's just focus on the colored vegetables and fruits. Whole grains, okay? When you buy bread, if it says, wheat and stuff like that, it has to be 100% wheat or whole grain. And when they say 7-level grain, I don't like it. If it's whole grain, I want it 100% whole grain. Of course, I want everything, every fruit, every vegetable to be organic. Otherwise, I don't want to be consuming pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides, because they are all in there when they are planting the seeds. So the top choices: if you have good food, you are what you eat, and then that means it will lower your hypertension. That means blood pressure goes down. You can control blood glucose, as I mentioned. Type 2 is sipping in the young generation now. And then weight control also. You can manage your weight gain. As I said, obesity or overweight is the real risk factor for all kinds of diseases, the metabolic syndrome diseases. The cardiovascular diseases are also affected. The cardiovascular basically means anything to do with your heart and any of the vessels attached to the heart, because the heart is pumping blood through the vessels, right? The arteries take blood all the way to the extremities, all the way to the rest of the organs, and then the veins let the blood travel back. Cancer, my field, yes. If you don't eat the right food, you can, even the preservative I mentioned, high fructose corn syrup, it could be carcinogenic if it's consumed in high amounts for a long period of time. All right. So this is just a few of them I'm mentioning here. There's so many things to talk about. When you eat right, you can actually live right. Okay. Also, specific nutrients that can impact your health. Plant pigments found in bright orange, red fruits, and vegetables reduce eye diseases. Certain eye glaucoma or all those things. If you actually consume them in the right proportion and then in the right way, mostly in the right period of time, then you can always at least get some kind of protection for your eyes. Calcium is a very important micronutrient. It's a chemical that basically is the most abundant chemical in the body. It maintains bone health. And vitamin D, of course, helps in its absorption as well. So you want to have vitamin D, so you have good calcium absorption. At the same time, you also have good bone health. As we age, we lose bone density. Our bones become fragile, right? And then if you fall, like an old person falls, that person is very hard to recover from that broken structure of the bone, right? So make sure that the bone marrow is not affected. The bone marrow is that part of your tissue, especially in the thigh and hip area, that contains stem cells. Stem cells are the rudimentary cells that differentiate into a number of other cell types. The epithelial cells, squamous cells, whatever, for the kidney, for the lungs, what have you. And the stem cells can also be cancerous sometimes if the right conditions prevail. B vitamins maintain brain health. What are B vitamins? B vitamins are water-soluble vitamins. Okay, I'm not going to go through this, but physical exercise is very important as well, not just nutrition. You cannot have one thing and then be at a deficit in another thing and then expect an excellent health. Physical, we are physical beings. We're supposed to be moving. We cannot be sitting on a resting position all the time. Our bone structure is in such a way that it has to be causing friction, right? The joints, they have synovial fluid in any place that it kind of folds, right? You have in the knee area as well, the kneecap area, and you have tissues, very sensitive tissues. And then you also have, tendons, cartilages, ligaments. All of them are helping in the folding and then bending of your structure. So let's assume that you're just sitting in one position all day long, like I'm sitting right now, right? You're not using it. If you don't use it, you lose it. As simple as that. The bones atrophy, the muscles atrophy, also myalgia. It's called myalgia, atrophy. And then eventually you will be in a situation where you cannot function normally. So you have to use it so that it does not go out of commission. Okay, so you can lower your certain cancers by having physical exercise. It actually complements the dietary ones that I just mentioned. If you eat the fruits, the vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, and then at the same time you exercise regularly. As again, remember this word if you don't remember anything at all. The steadiness. Everything you do has to be steady, routine, consistent. That's the only way you can actually get fruitful results. whether it's academically, in academia, whether in your career, professionally, or in life itself. Keep that focus all the time, but don't be in some kind of, pulse mode, up and down, that kind of thing, like a radio frequency. You don't want to do that, because that does not, if the consistency is not there, you don't develop any long-term effect, long-term value at all. There's no such thing. Okay, the rest of it, is, I just tell you, this physical exercise is beneficial for a lot of things. Okay, let's talk about your cell phones. I'm sure you want to know about this. I have talked about cell phones about 12, 13, 14 years, almost at the time that they were invented, and not necessarily invented, but at the time they were put on the market. They were used by people. Even Nokia, when it was the #1 producer of cell phones for consumers, right? For the customer satisfaction, all that stuff. One thing we need to know about cell phones, this is not my area, but I read a lot. And then why I read a lot? Because it has something to do with medicine. It has something to do with health. Anything that has to do with health, I have to read it, even if I have to understand the physical concept of it, even if I have to understand some of the not quadratic, but the quantum physics. I will learn. If I need it, I will learn. I'll find a way to learn. So whatever I learn, that's what I'm providing to you, what I'm giving you right now. And so it is, as a scientist, I'm very skeptical. You have to be skeptical as a scientist, right? But especially as a medical scientist, because you're dealing with the human body and the human mind. They're not necessarily constant. And then they also vary from person to person. So you can make some general concepts or conceptual kind of statements about the human body or the human organ or this or that. But still, when it comes to medical practice, it varies from person to person. So I want you to understand that. Okay, let's talk about cell phones, okay? They call them cell phones. Why do they call them cell phones? Well, because they have a lot of cells in there, right? Those cells are like microchips, circuitry, right? And what do they communicate? What do they transverse? There is a transverse wave, all right? And sometimes there is a sectional kind of wave as well. Well, they do generate or emit waves, radio frequency waves. What else does radio frequency, what other equipment or what other household appliance in your home, what other one actually emits radio frequency? Wow, microwave emits radio frequency. Oh, what are you saying that the radio frequency emitted by the microwave is very similar to the radio frequency emitted by your mobile phone? Yes. Do they have the same power? Yes. So what's the difference? I'm standing in front of my microwave, I'm cooking or warming up food, and then you're telling me the cell phone is also it has the same power? Yes. Power is not the issue. Power is not the issue. I hope I have the electromagnetic radiation spectrum to show you. I can come back to this. Yes, here is the electromagnetic spectrum. So anything that you see here, I don't know, can use very small here. I'm going to switch to this computer. I can see it much better. So you have the electromagnetic spectrum, right? You have the microwaves, the ovens, the cell phones, all of them have more or less very similar power. Microwave, for example, is 1,000 watts. There's 1,000 watts of power, okay, in microwave. It doesn't mean that just because we have this particular appliance, which is commonly used in every home, household these days, doesn't mean that the radiation that is emitted by it or radio frequency is negligible. It's not negligible. You don't want to be standing in front of the microwave and talking on the phone. Some people do that at home all day long, as if the microwave is harmless, innocuous. Of course, it is harmful if enough exposure is in the body, to the body, right? So let's talk about the electromagnetic spectrum here. I teach this in a physical science class. So this, you start with the smallest kind of energy, long radio waves. You have radio, I have a radio right in front of me, a radio unit. They also have radio frequency. They have some energy, but that is the smallest kind of energy. It's the longest wave. The longer the wave length, the smaller the energy output, the smaller the frequency. But if you have frequency that is very close together, that's a high energy. So if you go from radio waves to the left, you have AM and FM radio. AM is a little lower in terms of energy output than FM, and then microwave. So microwave is right here, the 1000 watts that I told you. If you go beyond the microwave, you have infrared. Infrared is the one that they use goggles, night goggles, to actually see the enemies in the thickness, in the pitch darkness of the night. They can actually do that. And then you have UV, I mentioned UV, different UV, A, B, and C, ultraviolet. You have X-rays, the dangerous ones in the medical practice, especially in radiology departments of hospitals and clinics. And then you have the most dangerous one, the gamma rays, right? Gamma rays are the ones that have the highest energy. As you go this direction, there's a shorter wavelength. As I said, the waves are getting much narrower and much closer. That is the most dangerous type. So where does cell phone fit? Cell phone is in this range. Okay, microwave, cell phone, everything like that. Wi-Fi, you know, you have a LAN Wi-Fi, the router that produces signals all over your house. You're sleeping at night, the Wi-Fi is still on. Signals are all running all over. If there was a vision or some kind of view in the air to show you what is really the colliding molecules or the electrons, not molecules, electrons in the room, you'd be scared. You turn off your router every night, especially if you have kids, because kids are developing everything, tissue, organ system, as they mature, and they may be incorporating all those dangerous signals into their body. Not the signals, but the signals may damage the DNA, and the DNA is damaged, you may have mutation. Mutation over a long period of time can bring about conditions like cancer. So that's the problem we have. Let's go back to the previous slide. What does it say here? Now, I don't know how many of you have iPhones here. I think it's in the iPhone hopefully كيس خوبي نبرومين لجاجو خان غقر كيس خوبي نبرومين كحتاجو من دوشاجو خان غقر صوت خو تايبي نبرومين يدي آياسنا أول محلك الحروس الدبيس والنارة أزو محلك يتعاروا ملتام راديشن يلبام يسيلفون لكن تسفوزا ساعات سواش برخو حبشاش برخو عرفنا جي سواش بجيه جي سباق نتراومينا ويوميا نوك على فكامين لكن حبشاش بزرزا هرو إيرينا إندونا ما iPhone كفت خقر I don't know the latest iPhone من مشاريع خا حكومة زوم درك موش بيحد إياش manufacturers original equipment manufacturer أو يزالاشو درك إياش بيحد good practicing manufacturing practice أنا كتبه you have to identify the safety condition of the phone or the safety level of the phone in terms of radio frequency and radiation. So if you open your iPhone, go to settings, click on about, legal, and then you have radio frequency exposure, it tells you. It tells you. And what's interesting is that it tells you, and it's going to be a long read. You have to read. Fine print, but you read a long way, and then you have a lot of patience, right? And then somewhere it will mention the dangerous spot, the level of danger that particular iPhone has. Okay, Telstra safety message being texted regularly to mobile customers in Australia. Australia is taking giant steps in trying to at least make the people aware of it. I don't know if anybody listening in Australia right now. The WHO, the World Health Organization, provides following information on how to reduce mobile phone exposure. In other words, they recognize, they admit that this thing is dangerous, that we hold in our hands. It has become part of our lives, right? We're holding it in our hands, in our pockets, in our bra, what have you. Use hands-free device to keep mobile phone away from the head and body. Right now as I'm talking to you, my mobile phone is way over there. Because remember, the radiation exposure is always inversely proportional to the distance squared. So the further it is away from your body, the more protection you have. Even if it's not on talking, you're not necessarily talking, it's still releasing low level intensity radiation, radio frequency. You don't want your children to have cell phone, and then they talk, and then they get dozy, and then they put it next to their pillow, and they sleep all night long. They're being, zapped by this signal or by this radio frequency. I'm telling you, cancer takes about 15 years to develop. So somebody might say, how come, we still don't have an avalanche or some kind of, epidemic of brain cancer and stuff like that. This notion about cell phones being dangerous, come on, it's irrelevant. They may say that. And I'm sure in some social media, in some cable news networks, they may say that. But I want to assure you, cancer can take up to 30, 40 years to develop. When they have this plume of cloud and Hiroshima and when they dropped the atomic bomb, right, in Japan, it took about 30 years before the people start developing all kinds of, glioma, brain cancer of the sort that's incurable, So we don't know. I don't know how long, 20 years since phones were invented. Excuse me. So it's a matter of time. Allah protect us. We don't know. So here, use hands-free device to keep mobile phone away from the head of the body. The head. Remember, there's something called acoustic neuroma. It's a benign kind of tumor that develops that actually is not blocking, but interfering with your hearing. That's why they call it acoustic hearing. Neuroma is a benign tumor. But you don't want the tumor, taking space in your brain, even if it's not cancerous. Eventually, that has to be taken out because it will interfere with the function of the brain, right? The brain has all kinds of white matter, gray matter, and in between you have the hippocampus and you have the pituitary gland, all that stuff at the base of the brain at least. But you don't want anything growing in there, taking up space, because that will interfere with the normal function of your brain. And in Finland, in some countries in Western Europe, that's exactly what happened. They found children having this neuroma, the benign tumor developing in their brain, especially in on the side of the brain where they use the phone. So try your best not to pick up. Okay, this first thing I tell you. You don't have to read what they're telling you here. The limit, the number, and legs. Of course. The phone is not really. The cell phone is not supposed to be used for long talks. The cell phone should be, hello, mommy, Ethiopia. ممكن بحالكم أمان بعدركم كل شيء بخير أنت ما شاء الله أبا ماما أنتيو أتحرد دولي وقامان أمانتي واتساب اسمه كتلة لالي من تشجري وايسا envelope جبر كله at least من كاكت فركاه. السلام عليكم. تبورنا. That's what this phone. And then if you have it on, you don't want to, especially for men, the young kids, they're putting it in their pockets. All right, you put it in the pocket. What do you get? This is exactly what you get. This is an actual depiction of what happens when the phone is on, but it's not, it's not communicating with the tower, right? The receiving. Your phone is the receiving device. The communication is being generated from the tower. There has to be a tower in every neighborhood for the cell phone to work. So you're putting that stuff. What's happening is that the phone is always trying to communicate, find the signal, okay? And when it is on, it is still activated. And this is the kind of thing that's gonna happen. And remember what I said about stem cells in the bone marrow? The bone marrow you have in the hip, in the thigh area, and those tissues that contain the bone marrow contain the stem cell. And what the stem cell? The stem cell is the original primordial cell that eventually gives rise to all types of other cells that go into respiratory, digestive, cardiovascular, any part of your body. So that stem cell in its origin is being damaged by this radio frequency radiation, even at low intensity level. Eventually, it will damage some of the DNA in those cells. Okay, so when you're carrying your cell phone in your pocket, since I talked about it for so long through so many seminars and conferences like this, I decided nobody's listening to me. I might as well just show the actual picture. Here is in the bone marrow, mobile folding pocket, exposed reproductive organs. Remember, for the man, the reproductive is right here, right? The reproductive organ, the testes. Testes are where the sperm is produced, right? That is the only reproductive organ you have right there. And you're exposing it. And then there was a sperm count that is low these days. I get a lot of calls from Geiso Ashum, Habashashum, Kaplashum. They cannot get, the ladies don't get pregnant, they cannot get pregnant. And the man always blames the lady. And I prove to them, because I send them to doctors that I know, and then they do a sperm count, motility, and also the potency of the sperm. And then they find out there's no way that it can approach the egg. And I tell them, and when I tell them, of course, I will make sure both of them are there. Excuse me, but this is what it is. What the doctor said is, you are the problem, man. And I've told enough people to make them reconsider their own lifestyle or their understanding of cell phones. I don't know if the cell phone is the result of it, because as a scientist, I'm always skeptic. But at least they have some way of knowing that that's not good. The same thing for ladies who are putting it in their bra or some other place close to their body. It's not good. So we already covered that. So let's move on here. I will look at tissue structure. Okay, let me switch to this monitor here. I can see better. So here we have prenatal. That means before born exposure of 900 megahertz of electromagnetic frequency induces pyramidal cell loss in the hippocampus of newborn rats. This is in rats. Okay, here is the exposed one. Here's the control. That means that everything is normal here. Everything you see is normal. Here is when you are being exposed to radio frequency, damages are happening in the hippocampus. That's your memory area. Okay, and then the evidence for mobile phone radiation exposure affects reproductive pattern male rats. 70-day-old male rats exposed to cell phone radiation. Middle age usually means about 70 days for rats, 2 hours a day for 45 days. Testosterone levels low. Testosterone is a male hormone that is predominant in males. And then you have increased enzyme tied to DNA damage. The enzymes are the catalysts, biological catalysts that enhance the rate of reaction, metabolic reaction in our body. And they could actually be expressed in a abnormal way and then damage DNA. So if the damaged DNA, that means you're talking about your blueprint for cell division is damaged. Overall, lower fertility with offspring showing diminished male productivity. Okay, a woman who has a cell phone in her brow, invasive multiple primary tumors, 34-year-old avid runner, Chinese-American woman who used cell phone for 4 hours a day in her bra for 10 years. Multiple tumors, cancers too. And then we have a 21-year-old multifocal tumors tied to cell phones kept in her bra. We're talking about really, really, very, very, dangerous situations. Increased glioma. I told you the brain cancer found in all case control studies published since. This is by the United Nations. So if you are, let's say, in your teens, right? I don't know. I think I have another one here. I might have skipped it. Okay, well, anyway, I did write something. I don't know what happened to it. If you start using cell phone before age 20, and I don't know, a lot of you maybe around, in your 20s or 30s, there's a 4 to 8 times chance of developing more brain cancer if you kept using cell phones for a long time. When they do studies, research studies to determine the danger of cell phones by these manufacturers, what they do? They actually they label or they define a user of a cell phone. This is how they define it. A user of a cell phone is one who makes 1 call per week for 6 months. That's how they define it. A person who makes one call per week for 6 months, and then they come out with all these kinds of conditions for that person: tissue damage, organ damage, cancer. But how many times do you use your cell phone a day? You know, what you don't see is what you regret later on, because you don't see it, you don't feel it. Just like a credit card, when they introduce credit cards, people say, "Oh my God, we can use credit cards." Oh, I don't have the money, but I have a month to pay for it. Okay, good. And then the month comes, they still don't have the money. Oh, basically, it's going to be tacked on to the previous month's balance. So I don't have to pay for it. So again, they keep using it until it gets out of hand and they become bankrupt, right? Similarly, this mobile phone that we have been talking about for a long time, at least I'm doing my job. Allah hopefully will not ask me, "Well, you didn't do a good job. You didn't tell them enough. You knew the inside story, but you didn't tell them." Allah forgive me if I couldn't get my message across, but I was persuaded in my mind to show pictures. Forget about making just statements, just pictures. So if you start early in your teens and all of a sudden you start using telephone for a lot of, long period of time, it's just a matter of time before you have those, they cannot see them. They could be subcutaneous if they're developing in the skin area, they're under the skin. They could be internal organs that, is very hard to see until you have some kind of physiological manifestation of it. So those beginning to use phones as teens have the greatest risks, right? Because remember, your tissues, your organ system, all of them may have developed over the time period of your maturity into your teens, but still they can consume a lot or absorb a lot of radiation than those people who are aged, so their conditions are not the cells are not receptive, they're not rigorous, they are not robust. But yours are robust, yours are still growing, they're still dividing, and they're still in their optimal condition. So this is a warning for all of us. This is the impact of any form of radiation depends on the nature of the waves. The reason why, did I mention the reason that the microwave and the radio frequency from cell phone, even though they have the same power, the reason that the microwave is not as bad, still bad, but it's not as bad as the cell phone, is that mobile phone generates what's called pulsed frequency. Pulse means like this. That means each time it's trying to connect with the tower or find a signal with the antenna of the cell phone. Just because the antenna is not observed, you cannot see the antenna on your cell phone, doesn't mean it doesn't have an antenna. It has an embedded antenna. So the connection is between the tower that's generating megawatts of power onto the head, the antenna of your head, your cell phone. The amount of energy that's generated is humongous. So let me tell you before I forget, the best time to make sure that you get yourself out of that path of the signals shaking hands, called digital handshake, when the tower is connecting to the antenna of your cell phone. If the phone is ringing, right? Let me show you. I think the best thing is to show you. Let me call myself. Oh, I lowered the volume, so I don't know. It may not come out the same way. And let me get the telephone. Okay, so here's the cell phone. It's ringing, right? It's my name there. I don't know if you can see it. So right now it's ringing. It's okay. I'm not picking it up. The best way to do is turn it on. Okay, the phone is ringing. I'm going to turn it on to see who's calling to answer. Okay, but I'm keeping myself away. Okay, hello? Okay, I'm talking to myself. The handshake is going on. That is the greatest amount of energy being, okay, let me turn myself off. That's the greatest amount of energy being transferred between the tower, with megawatts of energy coming onto this antenna of the cell phone, right? The best way, the most dangerous time is to pick it up and immediately transfer the phone into your ears. You're gonna put that soft tissue with all kinds of damaging radiation. And you keep doing that all the time, Allah knows what's going to happen. Okay, so that's one thing I don't think that I mentioned here. So this is the wave. The pulse energy is what makes the cell phone more dangerous than the microwave energy. Wi-Fi and microwave and the cell phone itself, they have more or less very similar energy output. Okay, I'm done with that. Well, this is the last one, I think. So sunlight exposure also has ultraviolet radiation, right? But the ultraviolet radiation, the B part, is the one that eventually helps us develop and activate vitamin D in our skin, eventually it gets into the bloodstream and then helps us in so many ways, cancer, or a number of other conditions that we will prevent. So the reason I'm showing you this is that sunlight exposure results in different UV dose. This is a woman who was talking at a conference. She's an expert in radio frequency damage to the health of the human body. So she's her granddaughter, the small one, and then her daughter, the adult one is her daughter. Both of them are being exposed to the sun, right? Their absorption rate is different. And when we talk about absorption of ultraviolet radiation from the sun, it's not the same. Even if you, of course, expose yourself too much to the ultraviolet radiation of the sun, the sunlight, of course, eventually you develop some kind of skin cancer, right? Melanoma or basal carcinoma or squamous cell carcinoma, any number of carcinomas can develop. But as I said, you only need about 20 minutes exposure every 2 days or every day if you can. And the best time for that vitamin D, by the way, before I forget, is between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. That is the most effective time for what's called the sunlight duration. And then the highest dosage of UVB you can get, okay? So let's stop that, and this is the last thing. I only have 2 slides for marriage. I don't know how many people are here. I don't see how many people are still listening. It's a very long, zigzagging way of presenting stuff because there are too many topics in here. You know, first of all, let me be frank with you, and I'm sure everybody knows that there's no such thing as a perfect marriage. This is the slide. I had about 55 slides, and this was the first slide, the title slide of a presentation I made to Habasha, our brethren and our sisters, Muslims, the Habasha Muslims, that they asked me to present, and I'm sure Brother Jamal Yusuf was also there in one of the series of lectures I gave. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage, but one thing I told you, I'm going to tell you about my life. I was one of those individuals that may have focused too much on academic pursuits and life choice career, and might have neglected the fact that I should get married too. I waited too long to get married. So I have children who are 10, 7, and 4. Okay, alhamdulillah, beautiful children, very intelligent children. But the reason I waited that long is that I thought, just like I could manage my career, my education, everything else, I thought I could, find that perfect timing for marriage. Not necessarily looking for the perfect wife, but I was trying to time perfect time. There's no such thing as perfect time. Let me tell you that. Learn from my mistake. There's no such thing as perfect timing when it comes to marriage. And then, of course, you want to get married to the person that has a lot of common attributes that you definitely list as maybe 2, 3, 4 top ones on your desirable qualities, right? That's a given. Even though our Prophet ﷺ said that you choose a wife, make sure you base it on character. You can marry her based on 4 things: beauty, wealth, and other things as well, right? But her deen and the most important glue that will keep you going for a long time in the marriage and have a successful marriage. But most of us consider that as one of the factors, not the main factor. Men. I'm talking to the men now. I don't know, you guys are men or you're still teenagers, but whatever your particular hierarchical position is, accepted is still honorable to mention it that way. With all due respect for you guys, if while you're pursuing your education, if you find the person that fits your general requirements, not specific or unique or top. There was when I was undergraduate, there was this guy from Egypt. He was a good friend of mine. He's a doctor of electrical engineer. He's teaching at Harvard now, but we were both at the University of Wisconsin. And at that age, he was looking for a wife. And he said he got tired and looked everywhere, couldn't find. I said, and then during Ramadan, we used to get together about 15 of us. He said, okay, why don't you give us a list of those requirements? What is that you're looking for? Everyone that we are directing you to, we are, pointing out to you, you don't seem to, what is the list you have? And then he gave us a list of about maybe 18, I remember 18, 19 things. And he said in order, right? The first thing he said was that she has to be very beautiful. Second thing, she has to be an engineering student. The third thing is like, no, I think the first thing was like maybe she had to be a Muslim, and then she has to be beautiful, the second thing, and then have engineering student like him, and a number of other things. So we told him, well, we did give you the suggestions of this and this, and it didn't become fruitful. So we're gonna have to reduce this list. We told him, okay, just give us the top 4, 5 things. Otherwise, we're not gonna find anybody. And then he kept the 4 things, Muslim, engineer, beautiful, stuff like that. And then we came back after a month. He said, no, we couldn't find anybody in the whole school. No, the Muslim Student Association, we couldn't find. And then he said, so what do you want me to do now? Well, if you want us to help you, you may have to cut it down to 2. You mean from 18 to 2? Yes, we have to do 2. Otherwise, we don't have time, Since you really want to get married, might as well, get down to the basics, get down on your knees. And he said, okay, I want her to be a Muslim and an engineer. She doesn't have to be beautiful. Okay, I think we're getting somewhere now. I think we might be successful. We can get it. After a month, we've couldn't find an engineering student, but we've Muslim. But a couple of them, they said they want to study. They don't want to get married. So we came back to him and said, and then finally he said, you know what? Just let her be a woman. That's the only list I have. Just let her be a woman. Inshallah, everything will be fine. We still couldn't find one for him. So the moral of the story is that you may have any kind of list that you put in your on your agenda, and you may not necessarily find that person. Allah, of course, the mawadda and the rahmah that Allah brings between 2 people is something that happens. And if you really have the minimum requirements, and then maybe 1 or 2 very, very important, what do you call it, determining factors, the ones you're not going to compromise on. If you hold on to those things and then the rest of them you leave, I think it would be best. Now, one thing that I'm sure the organizers of this seminar today or lecture today want me to let you know is that there's value in marrying your own stock, from your own stock, right? Marrying a Harari girl. I'm sure there are a lot of Harari girls that want to get married to Harari boys. There are a lot of Harari boys that want to get married to Harari boys, just because we don't necessarily have that kind of deep vein connection to the motherland or the Madinatul Awliya, which is Harar. That does not mean that you should completely neglect, that society. Try to find somebody who fits you. And then there is a physics theory. That's a collision theory of molecules. The molecules will collide. Enzyme will collide with the substrate if they meet. The only way you can collide and form some kind of active connection or interaction between molecules is if they see each other, if they collide with one. So the parents have to make an arrangement so that the boys and the girls can also see each other, or at least meet in, of course, controlled environment. But if they don't see, if they don't meet each other, from some kind of, telescopy or that kind of thing, it's very difficult to manage that kind of thing. But I don't have much to say about marriage except that learn from my mistake. I did make a mistake. I could have been married at the age of 21. I don't think that would have prevented me from pursuing my academic goals, my academic pursuit, or my career ambition. I don't think so. If the marriage went well, and of course, a supportive wife. And then for the girls, if you have a good, steady, good brother who respects his parents, and at the same time he also respects women. It's not like they think of women as some kind of controllable kind of human being. Of course, you don't want that kind of person, but try to get some sense of course, your parents will help you as well, but eventually you can still manage it. Imagine if you're married in your 20s or 30s, and then you have babies. By the time you're in your 50s, all of them are in college, right? So you have an empty nest of sorts, and you can pursue a lot of other things, right? And I found out I could pursue after I married and have children. I could pursue. Nothing stopped me from pursuing. I added 2 more degrees to my education. Even after I was married and I have children. So it does not stop you, but I think it's the responsibility of the parents to also arrange the environment or make it conducive enough for you guys to see each other, and then hopefully get married and settle down and have some kind of successful life, inshallah. So marriage is a natural bliss. It's nurtured. Just because you get married does not mean that everything will take care of itself. No, nothing takes care of itself. Something has to be cultivated, watered. You put soil in there, like little plants you want to grow in your backyard. You make sure sunlight exposure is there. Enough nutrients are in the soil, hopefully organic nutrients, right? And that's how you see a blossoming of that plant growing, right? Same thing with marriage. You cannot take it for granted. Okay, I can tell you a lot about, the certain conditions that will make a nurturing environment successful. One thing I can tell you, boys, about women, about girls, is that they're not necessarily interested that you solve their problems if you are in a married kind of life. Men have problems, women have problems. Women are only interested in you listening. If you really pay attention, 100% attention to their issues, listening to them, you will win their hearts, guaranteed, from experience. Okay, you will win their hearts. But of course, you should not be daydreaming, trying to look at them, but at the same time, your mind is somewhere else, roaming around. No, that's not accepted, because women remember. And women have, by the way, I taught about this a long time ago, like the memory of dolphins and elephants. Feel. Okay, feel. I don't know. This is Arabic. Feel. Girls and women, by their natural state, they have beautiful memories, especially about relationships. Whatever you say today to them, words can also be very, very important. They remember 10 years later. So if you really want to get married and you want to have favorable conditions for the marriage and you want her hand through her parents, you make sure you watch your words and also your attitude, inshallah. That's all I have to say. Allah accept our knowledge, the little knowledge we have. Subhanakallah. لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت الحميد العليم الحكيم. Allah is the one who actually bestows knowledge. We only have shreds of it, and hopefully we can share it with you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.